Hi, and thanks for joining us here at Rose Quartz Mediumship podcast, where we simply adore anything and everything healing and metaphysically based. I want to tell you a story about someone who's in my reality because I think it's a really beautiful example of why expansion work is so important as we move through the healing process. And I want to start with a little bit of background about the nervous system before I get into the story. One of the really interesting things about our nervous system is that we have a zone of homeostasis, what we are used to tolerating inside of our nervous system. And that is a flexible zone if you're willing to do some work around moving that zone of tolerance or that homeostasis. So I'm going to give you an example. If I have a zone of tolerance or a homeostasis of my nervous system of making this amount of money, and the amount of money that I want to make is up here, I need to shift my zone of tolerance up here so that I am a frequency and vibrational match for that amount of money. Similarly, if I want to be treated a specific way inside of a romantic relationship, and my zone of tolerance is down here, and I want to be treated like something up here, I actually need to move my zone of tolerance up here so that I am within that homeostasis, within that zone of tolerance. And this is a real thing, right? So if you take somebody who is raised in poverty, and you kerplunk them into a home or a family with a significant amount of financial abundance, they're going to feel uncomfortable. Even if consciously, cognitively, cerebrally, they want that level of abundance, their nervous system won't be able to tolerate or hold that level of financial abundance. And that's part of why doing somatic work, and somatics means in relationship to the body versus in relationship to the mind. So it's part of the reason that doing somatics around expansion work is so important. So now I want to tell my little story. There is somebody who is in my reality, and they came from a lack mentality. They were raised in a home where there was a significant lack or scarcity mindset and mentality. And ultimately, they went through a whole portion of their life not having financial stability or abundance. They also, like that lack mentality, isn't just around money. So they also struggled with that lack mentality around love. This individual did a lot of work, and they got themselves into a situation where they were living a very different life. They opened their own business. They scaled it. And they began making $75,000 a month, which is a huge shift from the place that they were in. Huge. They went from a very toxic, unhealthy, non-reciprocal romantic relationship to a open, vulnerable, healthy relationship. So all at the same time, these things began to happen for them. Their business scaled. They entered a really healthy relationship, and they got engaged. So if you just think about all of the amazing things that are going right for this individual, when that individual got to the peak of both their love and financial situation inside of their business, they began to self-sabotage. They stopped showing up inside of the business. They stopped putting in effort. And they began to step away from this business that was making a significant amount of financial abundance and was bringing them joy. They had a reason, right? They had another passion that they wanted to explore that felt very authentic. And while that is true, it was also a degree of an excuse. They could do both things. They absolutely had the capacity to. But they chose to lean away from the business that they had started and built and expanded and lean into something that wasn't stable, that wasn't creating that amount of financial abundance. And yes, they love that other expression of them. That's true, that's real. However, as a silent observer of the situation, it was so abundantly clear that their nervous system could not hold that volume, that level of expansion, pleasure, abundance, love. Their nervous system couldn't hold that. So even though they were able to build it, they weren't able to maintain it. They weren't able to stay with their zone of tolerance or their homeostasis of their nervous system up here. And so they began to self-sabotage to come back into their zone of tolerance. If this is where they had been, right, in their business, they began to self-sabotage so that they could come back down here into their zone of tolerance, their homeostasis of their nervous system. And I think that this is a really beautiful example because sometimes it's really obvious when we are bumping up against the max of the amount of pleasure or ease or joy or financial abundance or love that we are willing to tolerate. And the key word there is tolerate. We are willing to tolerate inside of our nervous system. And so this individual leaned away from all of this beauty, all of this love, all of this ease, all of this joy, all of this money, because their nervous system couldn't hold it. And that's one of the reasons that it is so incredibly important for us to continue to do expansion work, even when we reach our goal, where it is that we wanted to get. If our zone of tolerance is still lower than that, we might be able to get there, but then we're going to bump up against the max of that. And it's one of the reasons that expansion work is so important. Retraining your mind and your nervous system to be able to hold the amount of joy and pleasure and ease and abundance and love that you are cognitively, cerebrally wanting in your life is how you actually get there and stay there. That retraining process of your nervous system and of your mind really isn't that difficult when you look at how to actually make it happen. But it's the consistency around it. And even inside of that, there's a degree of self-sabotaging, right? If I don't do the things, the practices, the techniques, the meditation, the self-care that allows me to get into this specific space, that is my nervous system in opposition to the thing that I cognitively, cerebrally want. So if I understand the practices that allow me to shift my zone of tolerance or my homeostasis of my nervous system up, and I don't do those things, that procrastination, that avoidance, that is my nervous system self-sabotaging to bring me back into my zone of tolerance. And that is the aspect of me, the expression of me. And this may be a tiny piece of me, but the expression of me that is in resistance to that experience, having that kind of love, having that kind of ease, having that kind of joy, having that kind of wealth. There is some aspect of me that is in resistance or opposition to what I cognitively, cerebrally want. And as a result, that part of me that is in my unconscious or my subconscious is going to lead. And it will look like self-sabotaging. It will look like me not doing my meditation. It will look like me not doing the practices, the self-care practices that allow for nervous system expansion. And I think that this is a really important thing for us to talk about. Because if you want to change your reality, there is a component of recognizing that you need to override what your mind and what your nervous system are going to try to do. Your mind and your nervous system are going to try to bring you back into your zone of tolerance or your homeostasis. And your job is to override it. We really appreciate you being here with us at Rose Quartz Mediumship Podcast. And I hope that you have a beautiful morning, day, evening, or night, wherever it is that this podcast reaches you.